The rain crashed against the windows of the roadside diner like a warning from the sky itself. Trucks rolled past the highway in long shadows, while the old neon sign outside flickered weakly through the storm. Inside the diner, people quietly ate their food, avoiding eye contact with strangers the way small-town people often did. The smell of coffee and fried onions floated through the air, while an old country song played softly from a dusty radio behind the counter. Then the front door opened. The sound alone made half the room go silent. Heavy boots stepped across the wet floor, one slow step at a time. A tall man entered wearing a black leather jacket soaked from the rain. Water dripped from his beard onto the floor. A large patch on the back of his jacket showed the words "Hell's Angels." The patch alone was enough to make people nervous. A young mother near the window pulled her little son closer to her side. Two men sitting near the coffee machine lowered their voices. The waitress standing near the register stopped smiling. The biker removed his gloves carefully and looked around the diner with tired eyes. He looked dangerous at first glance. Tattoos covered his neck and rough hands. Scars marked his face. His gray beard was thick and his body looked strong even under the heavy jacket. But there was something else in his eyes too. Something quiet, something broken. He walked toward an empty booth near the corner and sat down without saying a word. The waitress whispered to another worker beside her. Both stared toward the biker nervously. "You deal with him," the second waitress muttered. "No chance," the first one replied quickly. Behind the counter stood a young waiter named Daniel. He was only 22 years old and had worked at the diner for 6 months. Unlike the others, he had never seen a real biker gang member before except in movies and online videos, and everything he had seen told him one thing: danger. His boss, Mr. Carter, walked over beside him and crossed his arms tightly. "Serve everyone else first," Mr. Carter whispered carefully. "Maybe he leaves." Daniel nodded nervously. The biker quietly waited in the booth while the diner continued moving around him like he did not exist. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Other customers who arrived after him already had hot meals and fresh coffee. Still no one approached the biker. Finally, the biker slowly raised one hand politely. "Excuse me," he called calmly. "Can I get a coffee when you have time?" The entire diner became strangely quiet again. Daniel swallowed hard before grabbing a menu. He slowly walked toward the biker's table while trying not to show fear. Up close, the biker looked even more intimidating. His hands were massive. Tattoos covered his fingers. A silver chain hung near his belt. His deep voice sounded rough like gravel when he spoke again. "Long night," the biker said softly. "Coffee would help." Daniel forced a small smile, but his hands shook slightly. "Actually," he began carefully, "we reserve the right to refuse service." The biker looked at him quietly. "I didn't do anything." "Look," Daniel whispered, glancing around nervously. "People here are uncomfortable. Maybe it's better if you leave." The biker stared at the table for a moment. Outside, thunder shook the windows again. "I only asked for coffee," he replied calmly. Mr. Carter suddenly stepped closer from behind the counter. "You heard the boy," he snapped loudly. "We don't want trouble in here." The biker slowly looked up at him. For a second, the entire diner held its breath. But instead of anger, the biker simply nodded once. "Understood." He reached into his pocket, placed a few wet dollars on the table anyway, then stood up slowly. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. People moved their eyes away from him as he walked toward the exit. The little boy near the window kept staring at the biker curiously, while his mother held him tighter. Before leaving, the biker paused near the door. For one brief second, he looked back at the diner, not angry, not hateful, just disappointed. Then he walked back into the storm. The moment the door shut behind him, the tension inside the diner exploded into whispers. "Did you see that patch? Those bikers are dangerous. Probably carrying weapons." Mr. Carter smirked proudly. "I keep this place safe," he announced loudly. Daniel forced himself to laugh along, but something inside him felt strange. Guilty, maybe. The biker never threatened anyone, never raised his voice, never acted rude. Still, Daniel pushed the feeling away. Outside, the rain grew heavier. 10 minutes later, everything changed. It started with tires screaming outside the diner. Headlights flashed across the windows violently. Then came the sound. Crash. A pickup truck slammed directly into a telephone pole near the gas station beside the diner. Sparks exploded into the dark sky as electricity snapped loudly overhead. People inside the diner jumped in panic. Someone screamed. Daniel rushed toward the window with the others. The truck near the pole had completely crumpled in the front. Smoke poured from under the hood. One side had already caught fire. "Oh my God," somebody whispered. Inside the truck, a woman was trapped. And in the back seat, a child. Panic spread instantly through the diner. "Call 911. Someone help them." But nobody moved outside. The fire grew bigger. The rain could not stop it. Daniel's heart pounded as he stared at the trapped family. The woman inside the truck was moving weakly. The child in the back screamed in terror. Then suddenly, another sound shook the parking lot. Motorcycles. Deep roaring engines approached through the storm like thunder itself. One by one, large motorcycles entered the parking lot. Black headlights cut through the rain while leather jackets glistened under flashing sparks from the broken pole. More Hell's Angels bikers. At least 8 of them. People inside the diner stepped backward immediately in fear. "Oh no," somebody whispered, "more of them." The motorcycles stopped near the crash. Then something unexpected happened. Every biker immediately rushed toward the burning truck. Without hesitation, without fear, the same biker from earlier led them. The tall, gray-bearded man sprinted directly through the rain toward the flames, while others followed behind him. "Get something to break the windows," one biker shouted. Another grabbed a fire extinguisher from beside the gas station pumps. The gray-bearded biker reached the driver's side and pulled violently at the damaged door. Flames reflected across his soaked leather jacket while smoke filled the air. Inside the diner, everyone watched in stunned silence. The biker punched the window hard. Nothing. Again. Glass cracked. Again. The window shattered. People gasped. The biker ignored the blood now running down his hand. He reached inside carefully. "Ma'am, listen to me," he shouted calmly over the storm. "We're getting you out." Another biker crawled through the broken back window to reach the crying child. The truck suddenly groaned dangerously. Fire spread faster under the engine. "Move," someone screamed. But the bikers stayed. The gray-bearded man finally forced the driver's door open with a painful roar of effort. Metal bent loudly before the door ripped open completely. He unbuckled the injured woman carefully, while smoke covered his face. Another biker emerged holding the terrified little girl tightly in his arms under his jacket to protect her from rain and sparks. The crowd inside the diner stood frozen. Mr. Carter's face had turned pale. Daniel could barely breathe. The biker he refused to serve coffee to was now carrying an unconscious woman away from a burning truck. Seconds later, the truck exploded. Flames burst into the sky while heat shook the parking lot. People inside the diner screamed and backed away from the windows. But the bikers had already pulled everyone to safety. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance now. The little girl cried against the biker's shoulder while he comforted her gently. "You're okay now," he whispered softly. "I got you." Daniel stared at him in complete shock. This was not the monster he imagined. This man had risked his life without thinking twice. The ambulance arrived minutes later. Paramedics rushed toward the injured family while police officers blocked the road nearby. The gray-bearded biker quietly stepped away from the crowd once he knew the mother and daughter would survive. His hand still bled from the broken glass. Yet he never complained. Daniel slowly walked outside into the rain. His legs felt weak with shame. The biker stood near his motorcycle silently, while the other bikers waited nearby. Up close, Daniel noticed burns on the biker's arm from the fire. "Sir," Daniel called softly. The biker turned calmly. Daniel struggled to speak. I judged you." Rain dripped from both of them, as silence hung heavily between them. Finally, the biker gave a tired smile. "Most people do." Daniel looked down ashamed. "You saved their lives." The biker shrugged gently. "Any decent man would." For a moment Daniel could not even answer. His chest felt tight with guilt. The biker reached for his gloves slowly. Then the little girl suddenly broke free from the paramedics and ran across the parking lot, straight toward the biker. Everyone watched in surprise as she wrapped her tiny arms around his leg tightly. "Thank you," she cried. The large biker froze completely. His rough face softened instantly. Slowly, carefully, he knelt down despite the pain in his burned arm. "You scared us pretty good tonight," he told her gently. The little girl smiled through tears. The child's mother, now wrapped in blankets, looked toward the biker with tears in her own eyes. "I owe you my life," she whispered weakly. The biker shook his head. "Just take care of your little girl." Daniel noticed something then. The biker's eyes looked emotional too, almost like seeing the little girl reminded him of someone. Someone important. One of the other bikers walked closer carefully. "We should go, Mike." "Mike." Finally, the stranger had a name. Mike nodded slowly and stood back up. Before leaving, he looked once more toward Daniel. "Next time," Mike said calmly, "offer the coffee first, judge later." Those words hit harder than any scream ever could. Daniel felt his face burn with shame. The motorcycles roared back to life one by one. Then the Hell's Angels riders disappeared into the storm as quickly as they arrived, leaving behind silence, and a diner full of people suddenly questioning everything they thought they knew. Inside the diner later that night, nobody talked much anymore. Mr. Carter quietly cleaned cups behind the counter without his usual confidence. Customers stared silently out the windows. Daniel could not stop replaying the moment in his mind. The biker asking politely for coffee. The rejection. The rescue. The little girl hugging him. It all felt heavy inside his chest. Very heavy. Before closing time, Daniel walked toward the booth where Mike had sat earlier. The wet dollars still rested on the table untouched. Daniel picked them up slowly. Then he noticed something else. Under the money sat an old folded photograph. Daniel carefully opened it. His breath caught immediately. The photo showed a younger version of Mike standing beside a little girl around 7 years old. Both smiled brightly at the camera while sitting on a motorcycle together. Written softly on the back were 4 painful words. "My angel, forever 7." Daniel stared at the photo in silence while chills moved through him. Suddenly, everything made sense. The sadness in Mike's eyes. The way he protected the little girl tonight. The pain hidden behind the rough appearance. Daniel swallowed hard. That biker was carrying a grief far heavier than leather jackets or tattoos. And everyone inside the diner only saw the outside. Outside, the storm slowly faded into darkness, while the empty highway stretched endlessly ahead. But somewhere out there, a biker named Mike rode through the night carrying memories nobody else could see. And Daniel knew one thing for certain now. He would never judge another human being so quickly again. The next morning, the small roadside diner no longer felt normal. The smell of coffee and bacon still floated through the air, and trucks still rolled past the highway outside, but something inside the building had changed forever. People spoke more quietly now. Every customer who entered mentioned the same thing: the crash, the fire, the biker who saved the mother and little girl while everyone else stood frozen in fear. Some people called him brave. Others looked uncomfortable admitting they had judged him too quickly, but no one talked more about it than Daniel. He barely slept the entire night. The image of Mike smashing the burning truck window replayed inside his mind again and again. Every time Daniel closed his eyes, he saw the little girl hugging the massive biker while rain poured around them. And then there was the photograph. The old folded picture still rested inside Daniel's jacket pocket like a heavy stone against his chest. "My angel, forever 7. Those words haunted him. Daniel stood behind the counter quietly wiping glasses while his thoughts drifted far away. He kept wondering who the little girl in the photograph was. Mike's daughter, maybe. Something terrible had clearly happened to her. Daniel could feel it. The sadness in Mike's eyes had not come from nowhere. "You're thinking about him again," said a soft voice beside him. Daniel looked up and saw Emily, one of the waitresses, carrying a tray of pancakes. "Everyone is," Daniel admitted quietly. Emily glanced toward the empty booth in the corner, where Mike had sat the night before. "I heard the little girl survived," she said softly. "The doctors say both of them are okay." Daniel nodded slowly, but the guilt still sat inside him like poison. "He asked for coffee," Daniel whispered. "That's all he wanted." Before Emily could answer, the front door suddenly opened again. Every head inside the diner turned immediately. But this time it was not Mike. It was Sheriff Cole. The old sheriff walked inside wearing a heavy brown coat while rainwater dripped from the brim of his hat. His serious expression instantly changed the mood in the diner. People respected Sheriff Cole. He had protected the town for over 20 years and rarely showed fear toward anyone. He walked directly toward Mr. Carter. "Need to ask a few questions about last night," the sheriff said calmly. Mr. Carter nodded nervously. Daniel noticed something strange immediately. The sheriff did not seem angry about the bikers. If anything, he looked thoughtful. "Those men saved lives," Sheriff Cole said loud enough for nearby customers to hear. "If they weren't there, that mother and child would have died before emergency crews arrived." Mr. Carter forced an awkward smile. "Well, yes, of course." The sheriff's eyes narrowed slightly. "I also heard they were refused service before the accident." Silence filled the diner instantly. Mr. Carter looked uncomfortable. Daniel's stomach tightened. "People were nervous," Mr. Carter muttered defensively. Sheriff Cole slowly looked around the diner. "Fear makes people do ugly things sometimes," he replied quietly. Those words hit Daniel hard. Before anyone could speak again, another police car suddenly sped past the diner outside with flashing lights. Then another. And another. Customers rushed toward the windows nervously. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Sheriff Cole immediately pulled out his radio. Static crackled loudly through the diner. Then a shaky voice came through. "Multiple armed suspects spotted near East Highway gas station. Possible hostage situation." The entire diner froze. Daniel felt chills move down his spine. East Highway gas station was less than 10 minutes away. The sheriff's expression darkened instantly. He rushed toward the exit while speaking into his radio quickly. "Units stay back until backup arrives," he ordered. "Do not engage yet." Then he stopped near the door and looked back at everyone inside. "Lock this place down," he warned. "Nobody leaves until we know what's happening." The door slammed behind him seconds later. Panic exploded through the diner. People grabbed phones immediately. Others whispered fearfully. "Hostages. Armed suspects. What's happening out there?" Daniel felt tension filling the room like smoke. Outside, more sirens echoed through the highway while storm clouds still covered the sky from the night before. Then suddenly, the television mounted above the counter switched to breaking news. A female reporter appeared on screen looking nervous. "We are receiving reports of an armed robbery gone wrong near the East Highway gas station," she announced. "Witnesses claim several dangerous men carrying rifles entered the station less than 20 minutes ago. At least 3 civilians may still be trapped inside." Gasps spread across the diner. One elderly woman covered her mouth in fear. "Oh dear God." The reporter continued speaking while shaky footage appeared behind her. Police vehicles surrounded the gas station from a distance, while officers hid behind doors and cars. Then Daniel noticed something else. A small child stood near the gas station window crying. His heart dropped immediately. "There's a kid inside," Emily whispered beside him. Suddenly, another voice, inside the diner, muttered nervously, "Where are those bikers now?" Nobody answered. Outside, the rain slowly began falling again, while fear spread through the town faster than wildfire. Nearly 40 minutes passed. The diner remained packed with frightened people staring at the television for updates. Police still had not entered the gas station because the suspects threatened to kill the hostages if anyone moved closer. The tension became unbearable. Then suddenly, the front door burst open violently. Everyone jumped. A young police officer stumbled inside, breathing heavily. "They need medical supplies now," he shouted quickly. "One hostage is injured." Employees immediately rushed to help gather first aid kits and towels. Daniel noticed the officer looked terrified. "How bad is it?" he asked carefully. The officer wiped rain from his face. "Real bad," he admitted quietly. "Those guys are desperate. One of them already fired shots at officers." Fear spread across the room again. Then the officer added something unexpected. "And now there's some biker gang causing problems near the police line too." Daniel's eyes widened instantly. "Hell's Angels?" he asked. The officer nodded. "Yeah, big group of them arrived about 10 minutes ago. Sheriff Cole is trying to keep them back." Daniel's heart started pounding. Something told him Mike was there. Outside, thunder shook the highway once more. Inside the gas station, terrified hostages waited while armed criminals screamed demands at police. And somehow Mike had returned to the middle of danger again. Daniel could not stop thinking about it. Without warning, he suddenly grabbed his jacket. "What are you doing?" Emily asked nervously. Daniel looked toward the highway. "I need to see." Before anyone could stop him, Daniel rushed out into the rain. The cold air hit his face hard as he jumped into his old pickup truck and drove toward the gas station with shaking hands. Police sirens grew louder with every mile. Helicopters now circled overhead while flashing lights painted the wet roads red and blue. When Daniel finally reached the area, chaos surrounded the highway. Police cars blocked every direction. Officers aimed rifles toward the gas station carefully. Terrified civilians stood far back behind barricades. And parked near the edge of the road sat 8 black motorcycles. Hell's Angels. Daniel spotted Mike immediately. The large biker stood beside Sheriff Cole near a police vehicle while rain poured across both men. They looked deep in serious conversation. Daniel moved closer carefully through the crowd until he could hear pieces of their argument. "You can't go in there," Sheriff Cole warned sharply. Mike remained calm. "There's a child inside." "That's police business." Mike looked directly toward the gas station windows. "Those men are nervous," he said quietly. "Nervous men make mistakes." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "And you think charging in there is smart?" Mike's eyes darkened slightly. "I think standing outside while kids cry inside isn't smart either." The sheriff stared at him silently. Daniel noticed something important then. Mike was not reckless, he was focused, controlled, like a man carrying painful experience. Another officer suddenly ran toward Sheriff Cole. "We lost contact with one hostage," the officer said nervously. "We think somebody's hurt bad inside." Tension exploded instantly. Then from inside the gas station came a scream. A woman's scream. Everyone froze. One of the gunmen suddenly appeared near the front window, grabbing a terrified cashier by the neck while waving a rifle wildly. "Back off," he screamed toward police, "or she dies." People nearby gasped in horror. The cashier cried helplessly. Mike's expression changed instantly. Cold. Sharp. Dangerous. For the first time, Daniel finally understood why people feared men like him. Because under that calm kindness existed something powerful. Something built for survival. Sheriff Cole saw it too. Mike, the sheriff, warned carefully. But Mike was already moving. Before anyone realized what was happening, Mike grabbed a black helmet from one of the motorcycles and began walking toward the gas station alone through the rain. Officers shouted immediately, "Stop! Get back!" Guns followed him nervously. But Mike never slowed down. The armed suspect inside noticed him approaching and screamed angrily. "I said stay back." Mike calmly raised both hands while continuing forward. "Easy," he called out. "Nobody wants more blood today." The suspect aimed the rifle directly at him. "I'll kill her." Mike stopped only a few feet from the entrance now. Rain soaked his jacket completely while thunder rolled overhead. Then he said something that shocked everyone nearby. "You know who I am." The suspect hesitated. Mike slowly removed part of his jacket, revealing the Hell's Angels patch clearly. The suspect's face changed instantly. Fear. Real fear. Daniel noticed it immediately. "That's right," Mike continued quietly. "So think very carefully before you pull that trigger." The criminal's hands suddenly shook harder. People watching could barely breathe. Mike stepped even closer. "You hurt innocent people," he said calmly. "That already makes today bad for you, but killing a hostage in front of me," his voice lowered dangerously, "that would make today your last mistake." The air itself suddenly felt heavy. Even the rain seemed quieter. The suspect swallowed hard. And for the first time since the standoff began, he looked uncertain. Inside the gas station, another child started crying loudly. Mike's eyes flickered toward the sound for one brief second. Then everything exploded at once. Another gunman inside panicked and fired a shot. Bang! Glass shattered everywhere. People screamed behind police lines. Officers raised rifles instantly. And Mike moved faster than anyone thought possible. He charged through the broken entrance directly into the gas station. Gunfire erupted. Chaos exploded. Daniel's heart nearly stopped. Inside the building, screams echoed violently while officers rushed forward. Sheriff Cole shouted orders through the storm while people ducked behind vehicles. Seconds felt like hours. Then another gunshot rang out. Then silence. Terrible silence. Daniel could barely breathe while staring toward the gas station entrance. Finally, a shadow appeared through the smoke and shattered glass. Mike. He emerged slowly, carrying a terrified little boy in his arms, while shielding the child's head protectively against his chest. The crowd erupted in shocked cries. Behind him, police officers dragged two suspects out in handcuffs. Another suspect lay injured on the floor inside. Sheriff Cole rushed toward Mike immediately. "You hit?" the sheriff asked quickly. Mike looked down. Blood ran along his side, beneath the leather jacket. Daniel's stomach dropped. Mike had been shot. But the biker barely reacted. Instead, he carefully handed the little boy to paramedics first. "Take care of him," Mike said softly. The child refused to let go of his jacket. People watching stood frozen in disbelief. Again, this man had risked his life for strangers. Again, he asked for nothing. Again, he became the hero nobody expected. Daniel felt shame and admiration crashing together inside his chest, harder than ever before. Ambulance crews rushed Mike toward a stretcher, but he resisted immediately. "Others first." "Sir, you've been shot," a medic argued. "I said others first." Even injured, Mike cared more about everyone else. The little boy suddenly pointed weakly toward Mike while crying. "He saved my mommy too." Those words shattered whatever fear still existed in the crowd. People no longer looked at the bikers with suspicion now. They looked at them with shock. Respect. Gratitude. Daniel slowly stepped closer, while paramedics finally forced Mike onto the stretcher. Their eyes met briefly. This time Mike actually smiled, faintly despite the pain. "Guess I've finally earned that coffee," he joked weakly. Daniel nearly broke inside hearing that. Because after everything, Mike still held no anger, only quiet humanity. As the ambulance doors closed, thunder rolled across the dark highway once more while sirens faded into the distance. And deep inside, Daniel realized this story was becoming much bigger than one diner, one biker, or one mistake. Because some people enter your life looking dangerous, only to reveal they are the very people willing to stand between strangers and death without hesitation. The storm finally disappeared 2 days later, but the town still felt shaken. People no longer spoke about weather or football games inside the diner. Now every conversation somehow returned to the same name. Mike, the Hells Angels biker who pulled strangers from fire. The biker who walked into a hostage situation while armed men pointed rifles at him. The biker who got shot protecting a child he never even knew. Some people called him a hero now. Others still looked nervous every time motorcycles passed through town. Fear did not disappear easily in small places like this, but something had changed. The walls people built inside their minds had started cracking open. And nobody felt that change more deeply than Daniel. He stood behind the diner counter early that morning, staring through the windows at the empty highway. Coffee machines hissed softly nearby, while tired truck drivers slowly filled booths around the room. But Daniel barely noticed any of it. His thoughts stayed trapped inside the hospital room where Mike now rested with a bullet wound near his ribs. The image haunted him constantly. Mike lying on the stretcher bleeding, while still joking about coffee. Daniel had visited the hospital once already the night before, but he never went inside the room. Fear stopped him at the hallway, not fear of Mike anymore, fear of facing his own guilt. "You gonna stare at the road all morning?" Emily asked while placing fresh cups beside him. Daniel blinked. "Sorry." Emily leaned quietly against the counter. "You should visit him." Daniel looked away. "What do I even say?" "The truth." Before Daniel could answer, the diner television suddenly switched to another news update. The entire room grew quiet immediately. The female reporter looked serious this time. "New information has surfaced regarding the armed robbery at East Highway gas station," she announced. "Police believe the suspects may be connected to a larger robbery crew responsible for several violent crimes across nearby counties." Pictures of masked criminals flashed across the screen. Then came another sentence that made the entire diner freeze. Sources also confirmed that the suspects specifically mentioned a biker named Mike during police questioning. Daniel's stomach tightened instantly. The room exploded with whispers. They knew him. What does that mean? Was he involved somehow? Mr. Carter lowered the television volume nervously. Daniel felt cold suddenly. Something about this did not feel right. Outside, dark clouds slowly gathered again over the highway, even though morning had barely begun. Then the diner door opened. Everyone looked up. Sheriff Cole entered quietly with a serious expression on his face. Unlike usual, he did not greet anyone. He walked directly toward Daniel. "Need a word?" Daniel's chest tightened immediately. They moved toward the back kitchen, where nobody else could hear. The sheriff removed his hat slowly. "I'm heading to the hospital," he said quietly. "Thought maybe you'd want to come." Daniel frowned slightly. "Why me?" The sheriff studied him carefully before answering. "Because Mike asked for you." Those words hit like lightning. "Me?" Daniel whispered. The sheriff nodded once. "Said he wanted the diner kid." Daniel could barely understand why. After everything, why would Mike want to see him? Guilt twisted harder inside his chest. 30 minutes later, Daniel sat silently inside Sheriff Cole's police truck while rain began falling lightly outside again. Neither man spoke much during the drive. Tension filled the silence between them. Finally, Daniel looked toward the sheriff carefully. Those robbers, he asked quietly, did Mike know them? Sheriff Cole kept his eyes on the road. Not exactly. That answer only made Daniel more confused. The sheriff sighed heavily before continuing. Mike used to ride with a rough crowd years ago, real rough. Before he joined Hell's Angels, he was mixed up in things he shouldn't have been. Daniel listened quietly. People can change, the sheriff added softly. Problem is the past doesn't always let them. Rain tapped harder against the windshield. Daniel suddenly remembered the photograph again. My angel, forever 7. Pain hid behind Mike's eyes for a reason. And now danger seemed connected to him somehow too. The hospital parking lot looked gray and cold under the storm clouds. Officers stood near the entrance speaking quietly, while nurses moved quickly through the halls inside. As Daniel followed Sheriff Cole toward Mike's room, he noticed something strange immediately. 2 massive bikers stood outside the door like silent guards. Both wore Hell's Angels jackets. Both looked dangerous enough to terrify most people. But when they saw Sheriff Cole, they stepped aside respectfully. One of them looked toward Daniel carefully. That's the kid, he asked. The sheriff nodded. The biker gave a small smile. Mike likes him. Daniel felt even more confused now. The hospital room itself was dim and quiet. Machines beeped softly near the bed while rain streaked across the windows outside. Mike rested against white pillows with bandages wrapped around his side and arm. Without the leather jacket and motorcycle, he looked older somehow, more tired. The scars on his face seemed deeper now under the weak hospital lights. But when Mike noticed Daniel entering, he smiled faintly. There's my coffee expert. Daniel almost laughed despite everything. Almost. The sheriff quietly closed the door behind them, giving privacy. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Mike slowly reached toward the small table beside his bed and picked up the old photograph. The same photograph. He handed it toward Daniel carefully. Her name was Lily, Mike said softly. Daniel looked down at the picture again. The little girl's smile suddenly felt heartbreaking now. Your daughter? Daniel asked quietly. Mike nodded once. Silence filled the room heavily. Outside thunder rumbled far away. 7 years old, Mike whispered. Smartest little thing you ever met. Loved strawberry ice cream and old country songs. His voice weakened slightly. She used to ride on my bike with pink headphones because the engine scared her ears. Daniel listened quietly, while pain filled every word coming from Mike's mouth. What happened? Daniel finally asked softly. Mike stared toward the rain outside the window for a long moment before answering. Drunk driver. The room suddenly felt smaller. Mike swallowed hard. Guy crossed the highway at night, hit my wife's car head-on. He paused quietly. I lost both of them together. Daniel's throat tightened immediately. Now everything made sense. The sadness. The pain. The way Mike protected children without hesitation. He was trying to save others because he could not save his own family. Mike noticed the emotion on Daniel's face and gave a tired smile. Funny thing about grief, he said quietly. It either turns people cold or it makes them protect everybody else harder. Before Daniel could answer, the hospital door suddenly burst open violently. One of the bikers rushed inside breathing hard. Mike. Something about his voice instantly changed the atmosphere. Danger. Real danger. Mike's expression sharpened immediately. What happened? The biker looked toward Sheriff Cole first before speaking. Someone torched the garage. Mike sat upright instantly despite the pain in his wound. What? Club garage burned 20 minutes ago. Somebody left a message on the wall. Fear moved through the room immediately. What message? Sheriff Cole asked sharply. The biker hesitated, then answered quietly. It said your turn. Silence crashed down like thunder. Daniel felt chills spread across his entire body. This was no random threat. Someone wanted Mike dead. Sheriff Cole immediately pulled out his phone and started giving orders to officers. Mike slowly swung his legs off the hospital bed despite the pain. "You're not going anywhere," the sheriff warned. Mike ignored him completely. The dangerous calm returned to his face again. "Those robbers at the gas station," Mike said quietly, "they weren't robbing that place for money." Sheriff Cole looked at him carefully. "Then what?" Mike's eyes darkened. "They were looking for me." The air inside the room suddenly felt heavy again. Daniel could barely process what he was hearing. "Why?" he whispered. Mike remained silent for a moment. Then he finally looked directly at Daniel. "Because a long time ago, I made enemies." Thunder shook the hospital windows violently. The biker near the door crossed his arms nervously. "This feels like Reaper crew." Sheriff Cole's face hardened immediately. Daniel frowned. "Who are they?" Mike answered this time. "Men worse than me." Those 4 words sent ice through the room. Mike slowly stood despite the pain, while machines beeped warnings beside the bed. "Years ago I rode with a criminal biker crew called the Reapers," he explained quietly. "Guns, drugs, robberies, bad people." His jaw tightened slightly. "Real bad." Daniel stared in shock. Mike looked ashamed even speaking about it. "Then Lily died," Mike continued softly, "and I realized I was becoming the kind of monster that destroys innocent families." His eyes lowered. "So I walked away." "People like that don't let members leave easy," Sheriff Cole muttered. Mike nodded once. "Their leader blamed me for losing business, losing men, losing control." The biker near the door spoke quietly. "Raven never forgave you." Raven. Even the name sounded dangerous. Daniel suddenly understood everything now. The robbery, the threats, the message. This was not over. Not even close. Before anyone could speak again, another loud noise exploded outside the hospital. Boom! The entire building shook violently. People screamed in nearby hallways. Alarms suddenly blared everywhere. Sheriff Cole rushed toward the window immediately. Outside, flames rose from the hospital parking lot. One of the motorcycles had exploded. Panic spread through the halls instantly. Nurses screamed. Patients cried out in confusion. And through the smoke outside stood 3 dark motorcycles across the street. Watching. Waiting. The Reapers. Mike's face turned cold as steel. "They found me." Daniel's heart pounded violently now. Because for the first time since meeting Mike, he realized something terrifying. The danger surrounding this biker was bigger than one town. Bigger than one robbery. And now anyone close to Mike might become a target too. Sheriff Cole grabbed his weapon immediately. "Officers are on the way." But Mike slowly shook his head. Too late. Outside, the 3 motorcycles suddenly roared to life. Then disappeared into the storm, leaving behind burning fire, terrified hospital workers, and one terrifying message. The hunt had officially begun. Mike slowly turned toward Daniel again. His expression softened slightly despite the chaos around them. "Kid," he said quietly, "you should stay away from me now." But deep inside, Daniel already knew he could not. Because somewhere between the burning truck, the hostage rescue, and the grief hidden behind Mike's scars, this biker had changed something inside him forever. And the deeper the danger became, the more Daniel realized Mike was carrying this fight completely alone. The hospital fire alarm still screamed through the building long after the Reaper motorcycles disappeared into the storm. Nurses rushed frightened patients through the hallways while police officers flooded the parking lot outside. Smoke rose from the burning motorcycle near the entrance, casting dark shadows against the rain-covered walls of the hospital. Fear spread everywhere, but inside Mike's room, the fear felt different, heavier, more personal. Because now everybody understood one thing clearly. This was no random violence anymore. Someone was hunting Mike. Sheriff Cole stood near the doorway speaking rapidly into his radio, while officers secured the building floor by floor. The two Hells Angels bikers outside the room remained tense and silent, their eyes constantly moving toward every sound in the hallway. Even these large men looked uneasy now. But Mike looked calm. Too calm. That frightened Daniel more than anything else. Most people panicked when danger arrived. Mike became quieter, colder, sharper, like a man who had survived storms much worse than this one. "They're getting bolder," one biker muttered near the door. Mike slowly pulled his hospital bandage tighter around his wounded side. "Because Raven knows I'm weak right now." Daniel frowned. "Weak? You were shot yesterday." Mike gave a faint smile. "Exactly." Thunder shook the windows again while rain hammered against the glass outside. The storm seemed endless now, like the sky itself refused to calm down. Sheriff Cole ended his radio call and looked toward Mike seriously. "Listen carefully," the sheriff said. "I can move you somewhere safe tonight, protective custody." Mike immediately shook his head. "Won't work. It's your best option." "No," Mike replied quietly. "It puts civilians in danger." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "You can't fight an entire biker crew alone." Mike looked toward the dark window. "I already have before." Those words chilled the room. Daniel suddenly realized Mike was not simply some biker with a tragic past. This man had survived violence most people could never even imagine. Before anyone could continue speaking, a nurse suddenly rushed into the room looking pale. "Mr. Mike," she whispered nervously, "there's a little girl asking for you downstairs." Everyone looked confused. "A little girl," Sheriff Cole repeated. The nurse nodded quickly. "She refuses to leave." Mike frowned slightly. Minutes later, the answer arrived. The small girl from the truck accident stepped nervously into the hospital room holding a stuffed rabbit against her chest. Her mother stood beside her with tears already filling her eyes. The moment the child saw Mike, her face lit up instantly. "Motorcycle hero," she shouted happily. For the first time all night, the tension inside the room softened slightly. Mike actually smiled. The little girl ran carefully toward the bed and held out a folded paper. "I made this for you." Mike slowly opened the paper. Inside was a child's drawing. A huge biker wearing a black jacket stood between flames and a little girl while rain poured around them. At the top, written in messy crayon letters, were the words, "Thank you for saving us." Silence filled the room. Daniel saw Mike's eyes suddenly grow emotional again. The rough biker carefully touched the drawing like it was something fragile and precious. "This is beautiful," he whispered. The child smiled proudly. Her mother stepped closer quietly. "I don't think thank you is enough," she said softly. "You saved my daughter's life." Mike shook his head gently. "Just glad you're both okay." The woman hesitated before speaking again. "People judged you wrong." Those words hit harder than she probably realized. Because deep down, everyone in that room knew it was true. The little girl suddenly hugged Mike carefully around his arm while avoiding the bandages. "Mommy says heroes are real," she whispered. Mike closed his eyes briefly. Daniel noticed the pain hidden behind his expression again. Maybe hearing that word hurt him somehow. Maybe because Mike did not see himself as a hero at all. After the mother and daughter finally left, silence returned to the room. Then Mike quietly folded the drawing and placed it beside Lily's old photograph on the table. Two little girls. One he lost forever. One he saved. Daniel felt something break inside him watching that moment. Suddenly, one of the bikers near the door stiffened. "Hold on." Everyone looked toward him immediately. The biker moved closer to the hallway slowly while reaching under his jacket carefully. Then came the sound. Heavy boots. Multiple people approaching. The entire room froze. Officers outside shouted suddenly, "Stop right there." For one terrifying second, Daniel thought the Reapers had arrived at the hospital. But then a familiar voice answered calmly. "Easy, deputy, we're here for Mike." 3 more Hell's Angels bikers entered the hallway carrying soaked jackets and serious expressions. Unlike Mike, these men looked openly dangerous. Tattoos covered their shaved heads and rough faces. One had a scar stretching across his entire cheek. Another wore heavy chains around his gloves. Daniel instinctively stepped backward. The scarred biker noticed immediately and smirked slightly. "Kid's still nervous around bikers." Mike spoke before Daniel could answer. "Leave him alone, Jax." The biker shrugged. "Just asking." Jax stepped closer toward Mike's bed and lowered his voice. "We found something at the burned garage." Mike's expression darkened instantly. "What?" Jax reached into his pocket and placed a small silver necklace onto the hospital table. The moment Mike saw it, all color vanished from his face. Daniel frowned in confusion. The necklace looked old and damaged from fire. A tiny angel wing hung from the chain. Mike stared at it silently, like the entire world had suddenly stopped moving. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. "Hanging on the garage wall," Jax answered carefully, "next to the message." Mike's hands slowly tightened into fists. Daniel suddenly understood. The necklace belonged to Lily. The room became deadly quiet. Sheriff Cole looked disturbed now too. How would Raven get that? Mike's eyes turned colder than Daniel had ever seen before. Because he was there. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed. Mike slowly looked up. "The night my family died, Raven was following us." Thunder exploded outside like a gunshot. Daniel felt chills rush through his body. "What are you saying?" the sheriff asked quietly. Mike's jaw tightened hard. "I always thought the drunk driver was random." His voice lowered dangerously. "But Raven hated that I wanted out of the crew." He looked toward the necklace again. "And now suddenly he sends this after 10 years. The terrifying truth slowly settled over the room. This might not have been an accident. Mike's wife and daughter may have been murdered. Rage filled the air so heavily that even the hospital room felt smaller. Daniel saw something dangerous awaken inside Mike's eyes now. Grief mixed with fury in a way that scared everyone nearby. "Mike," Sheriff Cole warned carefully, "don't jump to conclusions." But Mike barely seemed to hear him anymore. His breathing slowed. His expression hardened completely. "Where's Raven now?" he asked quietly. Jax hesitated. "Word is the Reapers are hiding somewhere near Black Ridge Mountains." Daniel noticed every biker in the room suddenly grow tense. Black Ridge. Even Sheriff Cole reacted immediately. "That old mining area?" the sheriff asked sharply. "That place is dangerous." Jax nodded once. "Perfect hiding spot." Mike slowly swung his legs off the bed again. The sheriff stepped forward instantly. "Absolutely not." Mike ignored him. "If Raven touched my family," his voice became almost a whisper, "this ends now." Daniel's heart pounded harder. Because the look in Mike's eyes no longer belonged to the kind hero who saved children. This was something else. Something darker. A wounded father standing near the edge of revenge. And deep down, everyone in the room knew revenge could destroy whatever goodness Mike still had left. "You leave this hospital," Sheriff Cole warned, "and there'll be blood everywhere." Mike finally looked directly at him. "There already is." Silence crashed down again. Outside, lightning flashed across the sky, while rain hammered harder against the hospital windows. Then suddenly the lights flickered. Once. Twice. The room froze. Every biker reached for weapons instantly. The hallway alarms suddenly shut off completely. Darkness swallowed half the floor. People screamed somewhere downstairs. Then came the sound that made everyone's blood run cold. Motorcycles. Multiple engines roaring outside the hospital entrance. The Reapers had returned. "Move," Jax shouted instantly. Chaos exploded. Officers rushed through the hallways while nurses screamed in panic. Headlights flashed violently through the rain outside as dark motorcycles circled the hospital parking lot like wolves hunting prey. Gunshots suddenly echoed downstairs. Bang! Bang! Patients cried out everywhere. Daniel's legs nearly gave out from fear. "They're inside," an officer screamed through the hallway. Sheriff Cole pulled his weapon immediately. "Get Mike out the back." The Hells Angels bikers moved fast, surrounding Mike protectively while helping him stand despite his injury. But Mike suddenly looked toward Daniel. "You're coming with us." Daniel froze. "What?" "If Raven knows you're connected to me now, you're already in danger." Another gunshot echoed closer. Glass shattered somewhere nearby. Panic spread through the hospital like wildfire. Before Daniel could even process what was happening, Jax shoved a black jacket into his hands. "Stay close if you want to live." The words hit like ice. Daniel followed them through dark hospital corridors while screams echoed behind them. Emergency! Lights flashed red across the walls like blood while rain crashed against broken windows nearby. Then they reached the rear exit. But the moment the doors opened, everyone stopped cold. 5 Reaper bikers already waited outside in the storm. Their leader stepped forward slowly. Tall, thin, covered in tattoos. A long black beard moved in the wind while rain dripped from his leather coat. And around his neck hung another silver angel wing necklace. Raven. His cold eyes locked directly onto Mike. Then he smiled. "Hello, brother." The storm exploded around them, while both biker crews faced each other in complete silence. Daniel felt pure fear grip his chest. Because standing between Mike and Raven was not just old hatred anymore. It was 10 years of buried grief, rage, betrayal, and possibly murder. Rain crashed against the hospital walls while 2 biker crews stood face to face beneath flashing emergency lights. Thunder rolled across the black sky as police officers shouted from distant hallways inside the building. But outside near the rear exit, none of that mattered anymore. The world suddenly felt small, dangerous, personal. Daniel stood frozen between Mike and the Reapers, while fear twisted through his chest like ice. Raven slowly removed his wet gloves 1 finger at a time while staring directly at Mike. His eyes looked cold enough to stop breathing itself. Unlike Mike, Raven carried no sadness inside his face, only cruelty, the kind built through years of violence without regret. 10 years, Raven said softly through the rain, and you still look terrible. None of the Hells Angels laughed. Nobody moved. Mike's expression remained calm, but Daniel could feel the fury burning under that silence like hidden fire. "You should have stayed buried," Mike replied quietly. Raven smiled wider. "Same thing I told your wife." The words hit like a bomb. Everything changed instantly. Mike moved so fast Daniel barely saw it happen. He charged forward through the storm and slammed Raven against the brick hospital wall with enough force to shake the metal doors nearby. Both biker crews exploded into chaos immediately. Weapons appeared. Fists tightened. Officers screamed from inside the building. But nobody fired, because everyone's attention locked onto Mike and Raven. Mike's injured side bled through the hospital bandages now, but he did not seem to feel pain anymore. His fist crushed against Raven's throat while rain poured over both men. "Say her name again," Mike growled dangerously. For the first time, Daniel saw pure rage completely consume him. Raven only laughed. Actually laughed. "Truth hurts, brother." Before Mike could strike him, Sheriff Cole rushed outside with armed officers. "Enough," the sheriff shouted. Guns pointed everywhere instantly. The situation stood seconds away from complete disaster. Mike slowly stepped backward, breathing heavily while blood mixed with rainwater down his side. Raven adjusted his jacket calmly like none of this frightened him. Then Raven looked directly toward Daniel and smiled. Daniel felt terror grip his spine. "This the diner boy," Raven asked mockingly. You replacing your family already? Mike's face darkened instantly. Leave him out of this. Raven ignored him completely. Careful, kid, he continued while staring at Daniel. Heroes like Mike leave graves behind them. The words felt poisonous. Before anyone could answer, sirens suddenly screamed louder from the front of the hospital. More police vehicles arrived while spotlights swept across the parking lot. Raven looked toward them briefly before smirking again. Another time, he whispered. Then the Reapers mounted their motorcycles all at once. Engines roared violently through the storm. Raven pointed once toward Mike before pulling on his gloves again. You took something from me years ago, he called out over the thunder. Now I'm taking everything from you. Then the Reapers disappeared into the rain, leaving silence behind. Terrible silence. Mike stood motionless for several seconds while blood dripped slowly onto the pavement below him. Sheriff Cole approached carefully. What did he mean by that? The sheriff asked quietly. Mike stared into the darkness where Raven disappeared. I don't know. But Daniel could tell immediately. That was a lie. 30 minutes later, the hospital floor remained locked down by police while frightened patients waited inside dark rooms. Mike finally allowed doctors to rebandage his wound after nearly collapsing from blood loss near the elevators. Daniel sat quietly beside the room watching rain slide down the windows outside. Exhaustion crushed his body, but fear kept his mind awake. Nothing about this situation felt safe anymore. The Reapers were hunting Mike openly now. And somehow Daniel had become trapped in the middle of it. The hospital door opened softly. Mike stepped out slowly wearing fresh bandages under a black hoodie one of the bikers brought him. Even injured, he still looked powerful enough to frighten most people. But tonight something else existed in his face too. Guilt. He sat beside Daniel quietly for a long moment before speaking. You should go home. Daniel shook his head immediately. Those guys know who I am now. Mike sighed heavily. Exactly why you need distance from me. Daniel looked toward him carefully. Raven blamed you for something. Mike stayed silent. What did he mean? Daniel pressed softly. Thunder echoed outside again. Finally, Mike leaned back against the wall slowly. Years ago, the Reapers robbed armored trucks, he admitted quietly. Cash, weapons, whatever they could steal. His eyes lowered slightly. One night, Raven ordered us to hit a family-owned security company. Daniel listened carefully. I didn't know children were inside the building. His voice sounded different now. Older somehow. Broken. Raven knew, Mike continued quietly. He just didn't care. Daniel felt cold. What happened? Mike stared at the floor. Crossfire. Silence swallowed the hallway. Daniel's chest tightened painfully. A little boy died. The words barely came out. Mike closed his eyes briefly. After that, I wanted out, completely out. He swallowed hard. Raven said nobody leaves the Reapers alive. Daniel finally understood the truth. Mike was not running from his past because he feared prison. He was running because he hated who he used to be. Before Daniel could respond, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway. One of the Hell's Angels bikers approached quickly, looking tense. Mike, he muttered urgently, we got another problem. Mike stood immediately. The biker lowered his voice. The diner. Daniel's heart stopped. What about it? Fire. Everything inside Daniel went numb. 20 minutes later, Sheriff Cole's truck raced through heavy rain toward town, while red emergency lights painted the highway. Daniel sat in the passenger seat, gripping the dashboard tightly, while terror crushed his chest harder with every mile. Please no. Please no. When they finally reached the diner, flames already consumed half the building. People crowded the streets watching firefighters battle the blaze while smoke filled the night sky. The old neon sign flickered weakly one last time before exploding into sparks. Daniel jumped from the truck immediately. Mom, he screamed. His mother worked night shifts in the diner kitchen. Panic ripped through him as he pushed through the crowd, desperately searching for her. Then suddenly, someone grabbed his arm. "Emily," crying, "alive. Your mom got out," she gasped. Relief nearly dropped Daniel to his knees. Near the ambulances, Daniel spotted his mother wrapped in blankets beside paramedics. Smoke covered her face, but she was safe. Barely. Daniel hugged her tightly, while tears burned behind his eyes. "They locked the back doors," his mother whispered shakily. "Someone trapped us inside." Mike heard every word. His face turned deadly cold. This was not random revenge anymore. The Reapers had just tried to murder innocent workers. Sheriff Cole approached the burned entrance grimly, while firefighters searched the wreckage. Then one officer shouted suddenly, "Sheriff!" Everyone turned. The officer held up a metal object pulled from the diner wall. A silver angel wing necklace. Raven's message. Again. Rage exploded silently across Mike's face. Daniel had never seen eyes look that dangerous before. It terrified him because Mike no longer seemed like a man trying to avoid violence. He looked like a man seconds away from war. The sheriff noticed too. "Mike," he warned carefully. But Mike was already walking toward his motorcycle. "Where are you going?" Daniel shouted. Mike stopped briefly without turning around. "Ending this." Rain crashed harder around them while flames consumed the diner behind him. The entire town watched silently as the wounded biker climbed onto his motorcycle. Daniel suddenly realized something terrifying. Mike was not planning to survive this. The engine roared alive beneath him. Then Daniel did something nobody expected. He stepped directly in front of the motorcycle. Mike frowned immediately. "Move." Daniel shook his head. "You go after them angry. You become exactly what you hate." Those words hit hard. The other bikers exchanged uneasy glances nearby. Mike's jaw tightened. "They tried to burn your mother alive. And they want you angry," Daniel fired back. "They want the old Mike." Silence filled the burning street. Rain poured over everyone, while smoke twisted into the sky behind them. For several seconds Mike said nothing. Then Sheriff Cole stepped closer quietly. "Kid's right." Mike looked exhausted suddenly. Older, the anger inside him still burned fiercely, but grief burned even deeper. Then a firefighter suddenly rushed toward them. "We found something else." The firefighter handed Sheriff Cole a burned photograph found inside the diner rubble. Daniel's stomach dropped instantly. It was the old picture of Mike and Lily. The one from the booth. Someone had stolen it and brought it back into the fire. Written across the burned photo in black marker were 5 horrifying words. "You should have died too." Even Sheriff Cole looked shaken reading it. Mike stared silently at the photograph, while rainwater dripped from his beard. Then slowly, something unexpected happened. The rage disappeared from his face, replaced by something far more dangerous. Clarity. Cold calmness. He folded the damaged photo carefully and slipped it into his pocket. Then he looked toward Sheriff Cole. "I know where Raven is hiding." Everyone froze. "Black Ridge?" the sheriff asked. Mike nodded slowly. "Old mining tunnels under the mountains." His eyes darkened slightly. "The Reapers used them years ago for weapons storage." Sheriff Cole immediately grabbed his radio. But Mike stopped him. "If police rush in blind, people die." "Then what do you suggest?" Mike looked toward the burning diner one final time. "I go first." Daniel stepped forward immediately. "No way." Mike looked at him quietly. "Kid, I'm coming too." Every biker nearby laughed instantly. "Absolutely not," Jax muttered. But Daniel stood firm despite the fear shaking inside him. "Those psychopaths already targeted my family." His voice hardened. "This became my fight too." Mike stared at him for a long moment through the rain. then finally gave the smallest nod. "Fine." Sheriff Cole looked furious. "Have you both lost your minds?" Maybe they had. Because deep in the mountains, beyond the storm, waited a violent biker crew, led by a man obsessed with revenge. And now, a wounded biker carrying 10 years of guilt was preparing to ride directly into darkness beside a terrified diner worker who had never even thrown a real punch in his life. The motorcycles roared alive one by one beneath the storm. Thunder shook the sky, and somewhere far away, inside Black Ridge Mountains, Raven waited. The mountains looked cursed beneath the storm. Rain crashed against the narrow roads leading toward Black Ridge while thunder rolled endlessly through the sky above. Thick fog wrapped around the dark cliffs like smoke from some giant fire hidden deep inside the earth. The further the motorcycles traveled away from town, the quieter the world became. No houses, no lights, no people, only endless forest and the sound of engines cutting through the rain. Daniel rode behind Mike, gripping the sides of the motorcycle tightly, while fear twisted inside his stomach harder with every mile. Cold wind slammed against his face, but it was not the storm making him shake anymore. It was the feeling that something terrible waited ahead. The convoy of Hell's Angels motorcycles moved carefully through the mountains, while Sheriff Cole and several police vehicles followed far behind on the muddy roads. Nobody trusted Black Ridge. Old mining accidents killed dozens of workers there years ago, and local people believed the tunnels were haunted long before biker gangs ever used them for hiding places. Perfect territory for men like Raven. Mike remained silent during the ride, too silent. Daniel noticed something different about him tonight. The pain, the grief, the guilt, all of it now sat buried under complete focus. Mike no longer looked like a wounded man chasing revenge. He looked like someone preparing for war. Finally, the motorcycle slowed near the edge of an abandoned mining road, hidden between massive trees. Rusted warning signs leaned crookedly beside broken fences, while old railroad tracks disappeared into darkness ahead. Jax removed his helmet slowly. "This is it." Everyone climbed off the motorcycles carefully while rain poured around them. Somewhere deeper in the mountains, metal creaked softly in the wind like ghosts moving underground. Daniel stared toward the old mine entrance, barely visible through the fog. The place looked dead, but Mike's expression darkened instantly. "We're not alone." Before anyone could react, a loud click echoed nearby. Then another. Red laser dots suddenly appeared across several biker jackets. "Snipers!" "Down!" Mike roared. Gunfire exploded through the mountains. Bullets slammed into trees and rocks while everyone dove for cover instantly. Daniel crashed hard behind an old mining cart as splinters exploded inches from his face. The storm itself seemed to erupt around them, while muzzle flashes lit up the darkness from hidden cliffs above. The Reapers had expected them. Jax fired back toward the trees, while Sheriff Cole's officers scrambled for cover farther down the road. "They're everywhere," one officer shouted. Daniel's heart pounded violently while bullets ripped through the rain around him. He had never been inside real gunfire before. Every sound felt louder than thunder itself. Mike crouched beside him behind the mining cart. "You hurt?" Mike asked sharply. Daniel shook his head breathlessly. Mike peeked toward the cliffs carefully. "Raven's forcing us into the tunnels." "Why?" Mike's eyes narrowed. "Because he knows the mines better than police do." Another burst of gunfire erupted above them. Then suddenly, a horrifying sound echoed through the mountains. Boom! Part of the old mining road exploded near the police vehicles behind them. Dirt and rocks blasted through the air while officers screamed. The Reapers had planted explosives. Panic spread instantly. "Bridge is gone," somebody yelled. Daniel turned in horror. The narrow road behind them had completely collapsed into darkness. They were trapped. Raven's voice suddenly echoed through hidden speakers somewhere inside the mountains. "Come. Mocking. Welcome back to Black Ridge, brother." The sound bounced through the cliffs like a ghost. 10 years ago you betrayed your family, Raven continued. Tonight your new family dies too. Mike's face became stone cold. Show yourself. Raven laughed softly. Come find me. Then silence returned. Terrible silence. Only rain and distant thunder remained. Jax moved beside Mike quickly. He's pulling us underground. Mike nodded slowly. Because something's hidden in those tunnels. Sheriff Cole approached through the chaos, while officers treated injured deputies nearby. We lost 2 vehicles, the sheriff growled, and radio signals keep cutting out. The mountains were blocking communication. Everything about this place was designed like a trap. Daniel suddenly realized how carefully Raven planned this entire night. The diner fire, the threats, the hospital attack. All of it led here. Mike looked toward the old mine entrance again. Darkness swallowed the tunnel completely. He wants me inside, Mike muttered quietly. Then he surprised everyone. He started walking directly toward the entrance alone. Mike, Daniel shouted. Mike stopped briefly without turning around. Stay here. Not happening. Mike sighed heavily. Kid, you don't understand what lives down there. Daniel stepped closer despite the fear crushing him. Then explain it. Lightning flashed across Mike's face. For a moment, he looked exhausted beyond words. The Reapers used those tunnels for trafficking weapons years ago, he admitted quietly. But that's not the worst part. Rain dripped heavily from his beard while his eyes lowered. People disappeared inside Black Ridge. Silence spread instantly. Even the other bikers looked uncomfortable hearing it. Daniel felt chills move through his body. What kind of people? He whispered. Mike's jaw tightened. Anyone who crossed Raven. The storm suddenly felt much colder. Before anyone could continue speaking, a weak voice echoed from somewhere deep inside the tunnel. Help! Everyone froze. A woman's voice. Crying. Daniel looked toward the darkness in shock. Then came another voice. A child. Please. Fear exploded across every face nearby. Raven had hostages underground. Mike closed his eyes briefly. That's why he wanted me here. Without hesitation, Mike grabbed a flashlight from one of the bikes and headed toward the mine entrance. This time nobody tried stopping him. Because now innocent people were trapped below. And Mike would never walk away from that. The tunnels beneath Black Ridge smelled like wet dirt, rust, and death. Old wooden supports groaned softly while water dripped endlessly from the ceiling above. Flashlights cut through thick darkness as Mike, Daniel, Jax, and 2 other bikers carefully moved deeper underground. Somewhere far behind them, Sheriff Cole coordinated officers near the entrance, but radio contact barely worked inside the mines. Every step echoed heavily. Every shadow looked alive. Daniel tried controlling his breathing while fear crawled under his skin. The tunnels twisted in every direction like a maze designed to bury people forever. Then Mike suddenly stopped. Everyone froze instantly. Listen. Far away through the darkness came the sound of chains moving slowly. Clang. Clang. Then crying again. A child crying softly. Daniel's chest tightened painfully. They moved faster now through the tunnels, while old rails disappeared beneath muddy water under their boots. Finally, the passage opened into a massive underground chamber filled with abandoned mining equipment and rusted metal containers. And hanging above them from giant chains were lanterns. Dozens of them. Their weak orange glow illuminated something horrifying. People. Hostages. At least 6 terrified civilians sat tied near the far wall, while armed Reapers guarded them with rifles. Among the hostages were 2 women, an old man, and a little boy no older than 8. Daniel's stomach turned. Raven stood beside them calmly wearing a long black coat, while holding another silver angel wing necklace between his fingers. There he is, Raven said softly. Mike stepped forward slowly. Let them go. Raven smiled, still pretending to be a hero. The armed reapers raised rifles immediately toward the hostages. Fear filled the underground chamber instantly. Mike noticed something else then. A pile of explosives connected through wires beneath the old mining supports. Daniel saw it too. Raven planned to collapse the entire mine. Everyone inside would die. You're insane, Jax muttered. Raven's smile widened. No, he looked directly at Mike. I'm grieving. Silence crashed heavily through the chamber. Raven slowly walked closer. You think you're the only man who lost family? His voice hardened. When you abandoned the Reapers, police raids followed. My brother died in prison because of you. Mike stared at him coldly. Your brother murdered innocent people. He was blood. Raven suddenly screamed so violently, the entire tunnel echoed. The hostages cried harder. The little boy buried his face against one of the women beside him. Daniel's heart pounded painfully now. Raven looked completely broken inside, not just evil, shattered. Dangerously shattered. Everything changed after you left, Raven whispered hoarsely. So I wanted you to feel the same pain I did. He held up Lily's necklace slowly. Loss. Mike's eyes burned with fury. You killed them. Raven's silence answered everything. Daniel felt sick instantly. It was true. The crash years ago had not been random. Mike's family had been murdered. The underground chamber became completely still. Then something unexpected happened. Mike lowered his weapon. Everyone stared in shock. Even Raven looked confused. You win, Mike said quietly. What? Mike's voice broke slightly for the first time all night. I carried hate for 10 years, guilt too. His eyes lowered briefly. But if I kill you now, Lily loses me forever too. Raven stared at him like he could not understand the words. Mike slowly stepped closer. You already destroyed enough families. Tears mixed with rainwater, still dripping from Mike's clothes. I won't become you. Those words shook the entire chamber harder than any gunshot. Because standing there in darkness, face to face with the man who murdered his wife and child. Mike chose mercy. Raven's hands suddenly trembled. For one brief second, Daniel saw something crack inside the Reaper leader's face. Humanity. Guilt. Pain. Then disaster struck. One nervous Reaper suddenly shouted, Cops! Gunfire exploded instantly. Chaos swallowed the tunnels. Officers stormed through side passages while bullets ripped through the chamber. Hostages screamed. Lights shattered overhead. Explosions rocked the mine supports violently. Daniel dove beside the terrified little boy, while rocks crashed from the ceiling around them. The tunnels were collapsing. Raven grabbed the explosive trigger instantly. But Mike moved first. He tackled Raven hard across the ground just as the detonator slipped from his hand. Both men slammed into muddy water beneath falling debris, while Reapers and officers fought around them. Get the hostages out, Mike roared. Jax and the others rushed civilians toward escape tunnels while the mine shook violently. Dust filled the air so thick people could barely breathe. Then Daniel heard something horrifying. A child screaming. He turned instantly. The little boy's leg was trapped beneath fallen wood beams near the explosives. And the timer connected to the detonator still blinked red. 30 seconds. Fear exploded through Daniel's body. Everyone else was already escaping. But the child could not move. Without thinking, Daniel ran back through the collapsing chamber toward him. Daniel, Mike shouted. Rocks crashed around them while dust filled the air. The little boy cried helplessly beneath the heavy beam. Daniel grabbed the wood desperately and pulled with everything inside him. Nothing. The timer kept counting. 20 seconds. Panic crushed him. Then suddenly, massive hands grabbed the beam beside him. Mike. Bleeding. Exhausted. But there. Together, they lifted the beam enough for the child to crawl free. 15 seconds. Go, Mike roared. Daniel grabbed the boy and ran through the collapsing tunnel, while explosions echoed closer behind them. But halfway toward the exit, Daniel realized something terrible. Mike was not behind him. He turned in horror. Deep inside the collapsing chamber, Mike still struggled with Raven beneath falling debris, while the explosive timer blinked beside them. And then Mike did something nobody expected. Instead of leaving Raven to die, he tried pulling him to safety too. Because even after everything, Mike still refused to let another human being die.